Okay, in this video, I basically want to cover some applications of tables, introduce you to some applications of checking dates, whether dates are within a range, and apply some conditional formatting. So I want to start this activity by opening up the expense report start. You'll see that we have listed here a data set basically that has a date which is not formatted yet, various categories, a description of an expense, and the amount of an expense. So one of the first things I like to do is go ahead and format this as a table. So we can go to the Insert button, go to Table. The table does have headers, so let's go ahead and hit OK. I tend to use this black, gray, and white color scheme. You might want to do some additional formatting here as far as the date is concerned. We'd like to format that as a short date, so you can select the entire column, go to this formatting option, and go to short date here. Category and description look fine to me. You might also want to change the amount to a currency. Let's go ahead and change that to $1. The idea here is that if we have created a table, it's very easy to add expenses. Let's go ahead and make sure our data set is sorted. We can do that by selecting the entire data set, go to the sort, and let's sort by date. And again, the idea is that we can go down to the very bottom of the report and append new entries. So, maybe you have a home expense, maybe you go to the gas station today, or you just want to update your log. So let's first talk a little bit about how to summarize this data. What I'd like to do actually is take all the categories, and I'm going to use a data validation technique so we can be consistent in how we document the categories and or the descriptions. Okay, so what you might want to do is go ahead and copy the entire category field, and let's paste this over in F, and I'm just going to paste the values. So home, paste, special, values. And actually what I want to do is remove all the duplicates, provided that the category is a header. So you can go to Data, remove the duplicates. We only have column F, but we got to remember to select the header. We get a report that 174 duplicates were found, 10 unique values remain. Let's hit OK. I'm actually going to format this as a table as well. So let's go to Insert, Table. My data has headers. It's formatted as the same black and gray. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I want some consistency built in to the category so I can summarize the data a little bit more effectively. What you can do here is go to Data, Data Validation, and I want to allow values that are from a list. So I'm going to select List, remove anything from the source here, and I'm going to list the source as the categories. So similar to new entries in the report field, if I have a new category, I can easily add that category to the list. Now let's watch what happens if I select OK here. Basically, you'll see a drop-down menu for these items. You can select any category. I'm going to leave this on the fast food, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that formula down. So let's use the shortcut key Control D. Oh, actually, I don't want to do that. Let's undo. All these categories are set to values that are in the field. What I actually want to do is copy and paste the formula. not actually the formula, but the validation itself, because I want to leave these names, these categories here, and I just want to apply the drop down to it. So let's use the validation and hit OK. Now for each one of these categories that we select, we'll see the arrow pointing down, and we've left the values where they belong. So before, I actually didn't think, before I filled this down, I didn't want all these categories to be fast food, obviously. So, but I did want the drop down in every cell. So that's why we pasted special and just the validation portion. Okay, so we might also want to do this for description. If you'd like to do that, by all means, go ahead. But I'm going to keep this video somewhat concise. Let's add a subtotal calculated field. And notice it'll get added to this table, which is probably called table 2. Now I basically want to create a summary of all the expenses. And what you might want to do first is just sort this in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go to data, sort my category. That way these are in order and auto is first. So let's go ahead and write a formula that calculates the subtotal for each of these categories. So we're going to use the sum ifs. The range will be the amount. And notice this is how it gets entered into the formula if you formatted your data range as a table. The criteria will be, let's start from the top, it'll be this category. So I'm going to highlight the entire category range. The criteria will actually be a reference to the auto. So as I fill this formula down, it's going to move from auto to entertainment to fast food and so forth. Let's go ahead and hit our ending parentheses here and hit enter. And we see that the formula gets applied throughout the table, which is exactly what we want. Might want to format this as a currency. And we might actually want to calculate a percent of where these expenditures are coming from. So let's calculate a percent. The percent here would be the 1646 reference divided by the sum of the entire table of the subtotals. We can format this as a percentage. And what you might actually want to do is apply some conditional formatting just to make it a little easier to pick out where you're spending the most money. So let's highlight this range, go to conditional formatting. I tend to use the data bars quite a bit, but there's various other formatting options. I'm going to select the green gradient fill. So now we can pretty much instantaneously see that our most expensive category is the other, followed by the household, and then pretty close tie here from groceries to utilities and so forth. Okay, so now we might want to get a little bit more clever in our summarizing capability. What we might want to do is write a formula that only summarizes the values if the date falls between a start date and an end date. So I'm going to create this option here. I'm going to carry over the format with a format painter. Let's see, I just want the black fill with white text here, and I'm going to put a border around. Okay, so the idea is that a user can come in here and say, well, only summarize these values if it falls on or after the start and before the end date. So here I'm just going to summarize or apply a date 1/1 of 2010. Here perhaps 1/1/2013. and obviously nothing has changed in the table above because we haven't applied this logic yet. So let's indicate that we have a user inputted value. Typically what I like to do is have my text read for anything that a user should be able to control. So let's go back to our subtotal formula and add this logic of the start and ending date. Let's take out this ending parenthesis, comma, and now the criteria range 2 will be the date, and we want to make sure that this date is greater. Well, let me write this out incorrectly first. We want to make sure that the criteria is greater or equal to the start date, and I never want this to change, so I'm going to apply my F4 $signs before and after the column, and I'm just going to hit parentheses. Now this is actually typed in incorrectly, but let's see what happens. It's going to tell me that I have an error. The only way you can actually get this logic of greater than or equal to, or any logic here for that matter, less than or equal to, not equal, so forth, is to treat this as a text by putting the double quotes around greater than or equal to, and concatenate the text with an and sign. So notice if I take this and sign out, it just thinks that this G14 reference is still text, but once we put the and, it'll light up green, recognizing that it's actually a cell reference. So let me go ahead and hit enter to prove that this works first. Okay, and in fact does. It gives us a value. We can add the second date condition. So let's highlight the date range, comma, parenthesis, that it's less than or equal to the end date. And again, I don't want that reference to move, so I'm going to hit F4, parenthesis, enter, and this gets applied down throughout the table. Maybe if I'm looking for just 2010, I can change the end date to 1, well, let's do 12, 31, 2012, and now you can start to see the values changing. Perhaps we'll, oh, I didn't mean 2012, I meant 2010. Let's change that. Now we can see that the values are actually changing here. So now it gives your user or yourself a little bit more power into summarizing your data. Certainly we can create charts and things like that off the table if you wish to do so. Another thing you might want to do is actually apply a data validation technique on the end date or the start date. What I mean by that is I don't want a user to put an end date that is less than the start date. So what we can do is go back to data validation, and now I'm only going to allow a date for this cell that I have selected that it's greater than or equal to this start date. Notice we also have some messages here. I have an input message. I'm going to title this entry, and I'm going to tell my user enter a date that is greater than or equal to the start date above. I can also prompt an error window if they do violate this rule, and I'm just going to call this error, and the message is that the date you have entered is not greater than or equal to the start. Please try again. Okay, let's hit enter. So now if you hover over the cell and click the cell, it gives you the instructions of what this value has to be. If we violate this date, let's say we put 2001 here and hit enter, I'm going to get this error message, and the error message is the date you've entered is not greater than or equal to the start. Please try again. So we can cancel, we can fix the date, maybe it was just a typo, change it back to 2010 or something like that. So now you have an option to summarize your data a little bit better, with the added benefit of being able to add more entries here. So I could add maybe, let's see, 12, 23, and 2013, and it adds it to the table, which means it's going to get added to the summary above. I'm going to put other. Actually, let's put school. And basically we're getting an error here because when we did the data validation before, school isn't in the list. So that's why we're seeing this. And we can definitely customize this error message. If you'd like to do that, that's fine. I'm going to put other, and I'm going to basically put in a large value so we can see that the table is in fact incorporating this, as long as we include the date into our summary table. And I'm just going to say this was books, and books cost $1 million. Okay, so if we go back up here to the top and change our end date to, let's say, 1/1/2014 and hit enter, now we can see that that other school expense is here. Double click this, you can see that the table summarized that perfectly fine. Now you might want to do a little bit more in terms of the arrangement, where you would actually move the start date, end date condition field to the side of the table, so you can actually insert other categories here, such as school. And now if we went to the bottom of our table, and let's say we have an expense on 12/24/2013, we can actually pick school from the list, and or modify the categories above for that matter. And I'm just going to say this was a computer, and computers cost $10 million. So if we go back up to the table, we will see that our table is summarizing that accordingly, based on the dates and based on the categories.